Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. It'll be a super show indeed as the big showdown gets closer and plenty of other things are going on throughout the sports universe, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been betting with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now that we are T-minus 3 days, or depending on when you're listening to this, to Super Bowl 59. Finally, the pomp, circumstance, all the analysis by paralysis, the breakdowns, the storylines. I'm sure you're probably sick of it. You just want to get to Sunday at 6:30 Eastern or 6:40, whenever they kick off this game. But for yours truly, who, as I said to you, what was it, about 10 days ago after the championship weekend where I said I hated the game, I didn't want to see another rematch. We saw this last year where Kansas City and San Francisco played in Super Bowl 54, and then they had the rematch last year. I get it, different cast of characters. Brock Purdy at quarterback, not Jimmy Garoppolo. And then you had Christian McCaffrey as a running back and not Raheem Mostert. But here it is. Second time in 3 years, as we know. We discussed these storylines going back 2 years ago, and even on Monday, I didn't really touch on a lot of different things because are you sick and tired of Andy Reid going up against his former team, as we heard just 2 seasons ago, on top of the scenario of the three-peat, which we all well know that is right now in big play when it comes to this Chief team. Yes, we could go through all that, the ins and outs, ups and downs, but I do want to point on a few key spots here and factors that are going to be a part of this game, because yes, we could break down X's and O's. We could talk about the obvious as far as, oh, well, the Chiefs need to slow down or contain Saquon Barkley. No, duh. Same for Steve Spagnuolo and what the defense is going to look like going up against Jalen Hurts, who looks like he's finally getting in a groove when it comes to the passing game. And I think that's going to be one of the things that is huge in this ball game, because we all know that we would think Steve Spagnuolo is probably going to stack 8 in the box to do whatever he can to slow down Saquon Barkley, to not have that home run play, for him to not break that 60, 70-yard run, which may lead to a touchdown or just a big gain for that matter. And the few key points that I look at here, and I'm going to start with that one in particular, is not just the obvious with Spagnuolo, but will the Eagle passing game go off? And think about this. 2 years ago, Jalen Hurts arguably had his best game of his whole career. He passed for 374 yards, I believe. He did have that one key fumble, which was huge. It was in the second quarter. And remember, the Eagles did have a lead at halftime. So I don't want to hear people saying, well, if the Eagles have a lead at halftime to get the ball coming out of the second half, that could bode well for them. We've seen this movie before. But I think the passing game is going to be huge, because everybody's going to expect Saquon to get his yards, to get a big-time run or two in the course of the game. So for me, I think what the Eagles will do offensively from the passing standpoint is going to be monumental, because I would think that Saquon Barkley, despite the fact that even if he does get a 100-yard game, does he get 105, 110, or does he get 180, 190? To me, that's the big difference, because if they're able to have a defensive output to where Barkley, yeah, he gets his chunks, he doesn't get the home run play, but for whatever the reason is not having a big imprint on the game, despite the fact that you can't sneeze at 110 yards. But I'm sure that if you're Andy Reid, the defensive coordinator again, Spagnuolo and company, that if you were to say for 24 carries to have Saquon get anywhere between 100 and 110 yards, you would settle for that. Now, what he does throughout the course of the game and when he gets those yards are going to be huge. But to me, I think what the defense of the Chiefs are going to have to do, and yes, we could talk about trying to keep Jalen Hurts in the pocket, try to get him up the middle to suffocate him that way. Do not come off the edge. We know that the defense of the Chiefs, they're going to try to blitz him at times. We've seen this time after time, whether it was Josh Allen, as we saw in the championship game, whether it was even last year, Brock Purdy, that key 3rd and 4, where if they would have got the first down there right at the 2-minute warning, they probably would have won the game and bled the clock out to 3 seconds. So you know there's going to be some blitzes dialed up at Hurts, and with him having not an 100% wheel, we've seen that leg not respond. Yes, in the Ram game where he seemed to re-injure it, and even though he's had his moments in that Washington game, but it was the passing that pretty much led them. Yes, Barkley did have the big run there to start their first offensive series, but this is where I'm going to look at this game on a whole, how he performs there in the passing game. And yes, maybe they go back to a couple of years ago, pretty much the same personnel. Of course, you have a couple of interchangeable parts there with the Chief defense, but I think that's going to be enormous, how that passing game, and if I was the offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, I would throw the ball. Even if they dink and dunk, and we know that this isn't the Air Coryell offense where they're going to stretch the field. Yes, they may make their plays or take their shots like the 4th and 5 that we saw in the NFC Championship game against the Commanders, which was the biggest play in the game, where they had the one-on-one with Marcus Lattimore left side, which led to that touchdown at 21-10 at the time, or was it 21-13, I believe, so 21-12. So for the Eagles, I think it's imperative to get their passing game in sync and then open it up for Barkley, because then you'll have their defense on the heels to where they're going to expect pass, and then maybe you could get that big run by Barkley as opposed to just first down Barkley, second down Barkley, or first down mixing it up that way. Who knows what the game plan is for Kellen Moore, but I think if they were to have more of a passing attack, and I could give you an example. In the regular season, mid-December, when Pittsburgh went to Philadelphia, and remember, that was an offense that was sputtering offensively, especially from the passing game. And what happened? They threw the ball. Jalen Hurts finally was able to shake the cobwebs. We understand that he had the concussion there and was out, but was able to throw for 275 yards. And Saquon Barkley in that game had 14 rushes. There was a time of the game that he didn't play because he was hurt, but he did come back. He only had 14 carries for 61 yards. And I think that may be a blueprint for what the Chiefs are going to look at to try to, slow down Barkley and maybe see how the Eagles came out in that game, maybe as a carbon copy for this game come Sunday night. So that's just one factor that I'm looking at as far as the Eagles go. On the other side is the Chiefs being able to contain a pass rush that a lot of people thought was going to get to Mahomes 2 years ago. And because of the slick field there in Arizona, as I'm sure you well know, how they had to change cleats, and even that didn't work. It felt like it was a skating rink out there where guys like Hassan Reddick and Javon Hargrave and Brandon Graham, that they weren't able to get the good traction to get that push upfield to at least put some pressure on Mahomes. And remember, that was the year where Mahomes had that bad ankle that he twisted in the divisional game against Jacksonville. And for now, him being 100% healthy and, of course, playing indoors at a dome, you don't have to worry about having to water the sod, because remember, in Arizona, that's the type of surface that they're able to wheel out and then wheel back in, so it can get some sunlight and they can be able to have a very healthy surface. Not the case here where it's going to be turf. So to me, when you have Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter as well as Jordan Davis, and with their secondary, we would think that they're going to have some blitzes at times, the C.J. Gardner-Johnsons of the world and players like that, which may have a shot at the quarterback. And I think that's going to be imperative with this offensive line by the Chiefs, knowing that they've had moments in their past Super Bowls, more in particular that game against the Buccaneers where Patrick Mahomes is running for his life. But I really, truly believe that the pass rush this time around, with controlled environment and the field not being a factor, but for the Eagles to be able to get pressure on Mahomes, and we know he'll be able to escape, but is it going to be a scenario where it's similar to the Super Bowl against Tampa, 4 years ago? Or is it going to be a scenario where they're going to have a quick passing game? You already see a lot of those quick wide receiver screens or bubble screens where you know that the Chiefs are going to try to get the ball out of their hands, knowing that the pressure by the Eagles is going to be fast and furious. So to me, that's another intriguing aspect of this game, similar to what we didn't see 2 years ago. But now I would think with a different set of personnel and a much younger set of personnel, how the pass rush of the Eagles is going to impact the Chief offense. And as we all know, this isn't the Chief offense even from a couple of years ago where they were able to put up 30 points in their sleep. It's a bit of a struggle. And even though somehow, some way they find a way to win these games, but I would think that those are going to be the two underlying factors of this game, other than the obvious of, oh, we got to pressure Mahomes or keep him in the pocket. That's obvious. But for that defensive line and for them to try to get the attack on Mahomes, not only just to try to keep him in the pocket, but is it going to be effective this time around than it was 2 years ago? And to me, that's enormous. So for those two reasons there, I want to start because we could talk about X factors. We could talk about, who's going to be a key player on each team or someone that's going to be a wild card, so to speak, whether it be a Dallas Goedert for the Eagles or whether it be even a guy like Noah Gray, the tight end. And I'm talking about those two tight ends in particular because, Travis Kelce, although he's 35 years of age and on the downside of his career, but we would think he's going to have his moments to catch a couple of key grabs. So he's not really an X factor. I'm not going to look at Isaiah Pacheco. I'm not going to look at even a guy like Xavier Worthy. Those are guys that are going to be ingrained, or you would think that's going to have big-time plays under their belt before it's all said and done. So whether it would be a Noah Gray or whether it would be even, let's say, a Kenneth Gainwell, maybe a guy that catches a big third down pass or gets a couple of key plays where they get first downs or obviously moving the chains or maybe even getting into the end zone. So, yeah, we could talk about all that as well. But how I look at it in the big picture here, and I know this is more of an intangible. You can't really predict this. You can't really forecast how games are going to play out. This isn't like baseball where you try to be the smartest guy in the room, how this is going to play out before the game at 7:30 at night or 1 o'clock in the afternoon where everybody tries to have a meeting of the minds and it says, all right, well, how is this going to play out in the sixth inning or in this case, the third quarter where it comes to 2-point conversions or fourth downs or anything like that. Of course, you can't predict those things. But here's the one thing that we do know and what we have seen here over the last few years, especially when it comes to the Chiefs, is that this team rarely beats themselves. And I get it. Is there going to be an off game at some point when you look at the body of work from a one Patrick Mahomes, when you look at all the playoff games, when you look at all the Super Bowls, and to think he's only lost 3 playoff games in his career and he's been, 8 years in the NFL, 7 as a starter? I mean, it's unfathomable to think that this guy has had one bad half of football. The second half of the AFC Championship game against the Bengals, which I might add, they had a big lead going into the half. And he was unable to do anything in the second half. All right, you want to give the Bengal defense some credit for making adjustments. You could do so. But even in the overtime, remember, when the Chiefs had the ball, he threw an interception. It was a deep one. It was, in essence, a punt. But still, it was a turnover there that led the Bengals to kick a game-winning field goal and put them into the Super Bowl in Arrowhead. And then the other game, Super Bowl, where, as I mentioned, Patrick Mahomes was running for his life as the O-line was Swiss cheese. And, of course, with the game being in Tampa against the Buccaneers, against Tom Brady, maybe it was a thing where we didn't see or had the foresight to see that this could have been a tough game for Mahomes as it was. They only put up 9 points on the scoreboard that evening there in Tampa. And then, of course, you had the other game, which was his first year where they lost to the New England Patriots and was certainly valiant in a loss. But here's the thing. Those are the only 3 losses he's had. He's had one bad half. We're looking around and think, well, he's due to have a bad game, isn't he? Well, when is it going to happen? If it hasn't happened to this point. Yes, it could possibly happen here with some of the things that I detailed. Will the Eagle defense show up to where Mahomes is scrambling for his life? He has a very subpar first half for him where, let's say, he's 10 for 18 for 80 yards. He's thrown an interception. And even if he does put up numbers like that, it's just the first half. The Eagles are going to have to do a carbon copy of that if they're going to have any shot to win, a la the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers. And what was that? Super Bowl 55. So we can talk about how they're due. They need to have a bounce of the ball go the other way. They're going to have a call go against them, which I'm not going to even throw that in as a factor because you would think that the officials are going to be on their P's and Q's. They know and have read the room here over the last 2 weeks where Ron Torbert is the head referee. There is no way, unless it's egregious. And we've seen in these Super Bowls over the years, whether it was the Super Bowl 2 years ago against the Eagles, whether it was the Cincinnati LA Rams Super Bowl where they didn't call any flags. Remember T. Higgins, the catch on the sidelines, where he certainly had offensive pass interference, but was able to get into the end zone for a touchdown. But it wasn't until late in the game where Logan Wilson, I believe, held Cooper Kupp. And the one time where they didn't swallow the whistle, that was a huge third down, which led to points and a field goal, which eventually won the game for the Rams. So unless they're going to swallow their whistles throughout the whole game, and unless it's going to be clean for 3.5 quarters, and all of a sudden we're going to make that one call where obviously all of America will be in an uproar because there's so many people that do not want to see the Chiefs win. Everybody has the Chief fatigue, as we talked about, tired of Travis Kelce with his commercials and the podcast with his brother, and his brother's going to be there, and Taylor Swift, and who else is going to be in the luxury suite come Sunday night in New Orleans. So yes, we are sick and tired of that. But I don't think the officials, they know that they're going to have to be in their P's and Q's. So unless they see something where it's absolutely 1,000% obvious, then I think they'll throw the flag. Anything that's dubious, and if they do throw the flag, then this is going to be the talking point come Monday if it leads to a Chief win. Now, if it leads to a Chief loss where the Eagles get the call, that's going to be the flip side, and who knows how that's going to be unpacked. But we all know for sure that the Chiefs are a team that if they do make mistakes, it seems like it's early in the game. Last week against Buffalo, the Mahomes fumble, which led to a touchdown. But after that, they pretty much played a clean game. And I understand you can't predict that. I understand you can't look at, turnovers or field position or situations where you're going to get that key penalty or that roughing the passer or that pass interference. No, if we had a crystal ball and could kind of detect at what point of the game we're going to get those calls, then what's the fun of it? It would almost be like, all right, we're scripting the game, a la like I just mentioned a few minutes ago with baseball, trying to figure out how this game is going to be played out prior to the start of the game. In football, you can't do that, and to me, in all the sports, you can't. But it's a thing where it's real. And officials aside, the Chiefs aren't a team that are going to have 2, 3, 4 turnovers a game, and next thing you know, the Eagles are going to go running away or maybe a nail-biter when it's all said and done. So now as we get to predicting how this game is going to play out, as we've seen here in these last 2 Super Bowls with the Chiefs, they've been close, they've been nip and tuck. They've come down literally to the wire where they got the field goal late by Harrison Butker. I get it that the Eagles had a shot there. It was bleak, albeit, and then the Hail Mary that fell way short, if you recall, that it landed on the 20-yard line by the Eagles where the Chiefs won the first Super Bowl, and then last year, again, going into overtime, the Brock Purdy plays I've talked about weeks on end, and of course, earlier in this podcast to where they had a shot to close out the Chiefs and didn't do so. And now the Eagles, you would think they're going to do whatever it takes. They know what that team is on the other side of the field. They played them last year on a Monday night, if you recall, where, let's face it, the Chiefs should have won the game if it wasn't for Marquez Valdez-Scantling dropping that ball there right at the goal line late in the game. And that was a game in Arrowhead, if you remember, on a Monday night. But the Chiefs always find a way. The Chiefs always seem to be able to rise to the occasion when they absolutely have to. Just look at last year. The game went into overtime. Niners go down, kick a field goal, and you already knew that that was going to be doomsday for the Niners because you just felt in your gut that there was going to be no way that Patrick Mahomes was going to be denied to get into the end zone to end the game and win back-to-back Super Bowls. And now here they are on the cusp of a third. I think the Eagles are going to be game. I think Saquon's going to have not a monster game. I think he'll have a big game, and I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't have a big game because I don't expect the Chiefs to come out fast and furious. Maybe if they do have the ball first and score a touchdown, all right, big whoop. But I don't see this being like 24-7 Chiefs at the half. No, I do not see that. And I could see the Eagles leading at halftime because I would think that the Chiefs will look at it as like, all right, we got them right where we want them. But I think this is going to be another game where it's going to come down to who has the ball last. And who do you trust more with the team that has the ball at the end? And granted that the Chief defense, for whatever reason, they have that bend but don't break mentality. As we've seen there, whether it was against Buffalo, whether it was against last year against San Francisco, whether it was the year before that against the against the Eagles, why would that change all of a sudden? They are very resourceful. And when you have a team and a quarterback and even a coach that is tough to bet against in January or in this case in February, how could you even think to bet against them now? Knowing that they have history staring right in front of them, knowing that, and I hate to say it, people, they win this game, they will have ended their season 18-2. And you could even argue the one loss that they had against Denver, they mailed that sucker in where they got shut out 34-0. They didn't start anybody. This will have to be, is it the 72 Dolphins of perfection? It is not. But they're going to be ranked as one of the great teams of all time because they're going to end their season at 18-2. They're going to put the cherry on top with a three-peat, which has never been done in the history of the sport. And you're going to have Patrick Mahomes winning a 4th Super Bowl at, how old is he? 28 years old, 29 tops? And he probably will be the front runner to win an MVP, another one I might add. And then you have Andy Reid with a 4th Super Bowl. I mean, everything is just aligned for this Chief team to win. But the Eagle roster from start to finish, you would think, or from top to bottom, is probably better, if not as solid as the Kansas City Chiefs. Maybe other than the quarterback. And I understand that that's a big if. And that's not shade on Jalen Hurts by any stretch, but if you're going to start a team tomorrow, who are you choosing? Jalen Hurts or Patrick Mahomes? It's a no-brainer. I think the Eagles are going to have a shot. I think they can win the game, and would I be shocked if they win? Absolutely not. But for everything that I've detailed regarding the Chiefs, and as much as I don't want them to win the Chiefs, but how can you bet against them? I thought Buffalo was going to go in there and win last week, and what happened? Didn't happen. And here I could see a million tush pushes. I could see a million, but watch this be the 1 year on a key 4th and down. Let's say, not even in the 4th quarter. Let's say it's in the 3rd quarter. It's a 4th and 1, and it's Eagles 17, Chiefs 13. And they stop them there, and then the Chiefs go down, score a touchdown, and then maybe get a turnover, and then they get another touchdown, and the Eagles come back, and then maybe the Eagles have a chance to take the lead or even tie there late in the 4th quarter, and then what happens? They get that strip sack, or they get that pick, or they get a fumble, and that is just a team that has the mettle, has the DNA, as I always say, the toughness, the grit. They know how to grind out these games, as evidenced by winning 17 consecutive one-score games. And I see that happening again Sunday. Chiefs 28, Eagles 26. I know people say it's going to be low scoring because the over-under, I believe, is 49.5. I think it's just going to get a little bit over. Obviously, due to math, it's 54. Because I can see points being scored on both sides. I think the Eagle defense, just like what you saw there against the Rams in the divisional round, they had a 28-15 lead. And the Rams actually had a shot to win the game there, as you know, that key 3rd and 2, the sack on Matthew Stafford, which pretty much iced the game for the Eagles there. But here's the thing. Even at 28-15, would you count the Chiefs out? Absolutely not. And think about this. If the Chiefs were the Rams in that instance with that game on the line, do you think Patrick Mahomes gets sacked on that play, 3rd and 2? Absolutely not. Throws it away probably, or avoids the rush and then throws it away and has a 4th and 2, and they probably would complete it, get a first down, and then next thing you know, they get in the end zone and win the game. That's the difference between guys who know how to win or do whatever it takes to win, whether it's ugly at 17-13 or 17-10 like they did last year against the Ravens in the championship game, or win pretty, Super Bowl 38-35 against the Eagles. So until I see otherwise, Chiefs will get their three-peat. Now, as far as other things that are happening in the sport, I know that the award ceremony is going to take place. What is that, tonight, I believe? Or it's in the next couple of days. I think it's usually Saturday night, but it may be tonight, come to think of it, where the MVP will be announced, the Walter Payton Man of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive, etc. But how I look at it is that, not that I really care or really matters. The one thing is because I know whether it is tonight or not, the Hall of Fame will be announced who gets enshrined in Canton. And the headliner there is Eli Manning, whether he gets in or not. And I don't want to pick on Eli. Everybody knows my thoughts on Eli. I think he's eventually going to get in. I don't think he's our first-time Hall of Famer, first ballot Hall of Famer. Not in my eyes, despite the fact that he has the 2 Super Bowl wins over the Patriots and the MVPs, etc. We know the deal. But I don't think he's going to get in. There are a couple other shoe-ins that are going to make it, and I should have had the list here. But what I'll do is I'll talk more about that on Monday. I just wanted to give you guys and gals a heads up, knowing that Eli is the headliner there. And you do have some shoe-ins. Adam Vinatieri's one. I understand he's a kicker. He's not a defensive player, etc. I know I'm missing 1 or 2 that I think are automatic locks, although Vinatieri is going to be a lock, but Eli is the headliner there. So we'll discuss more about that on Monday. Then you had a scenario which has kind of gone under the radar where Roger Goodell the other day, the commissioners meeting or luncheon or whatever you want to call it, where the question was posed on whether or not the 18-game season is going to be in the not-so-distant future. And even though he didn't quantify by saying, yes, it's going to happen or it's going to take place this year, but he's hopeful. He thinks it's going in that direction. Well, the head of the players, Lloyd Howell Jr., came out and said that the players do not want an 18-game season. Now, there's still another, 5 years before the CBA's expired, and we'll have to wait and see because, of course, Goodell's not going to tip the hand just yet to think that, oh, yeah, this could happen sooner or later. Of course, this has to be collectively bargained by the Players Association. You know the owners are going to sign off on this, and it's going to be a landslide. It's going to be 32-0. I'd be shocked if one owner says, I don't want an 18-game season because obviously that's more money in their pockets. But for the players, based on what he said, they don't want an 18-game season. They're talking about player safety, but how's that going to be the case when they're going to play 18 games? As it is, 16 was difficult, and then they added the one game there a few years ago, which everybody knows I hate, but for the head of the Players Association, he's coming out saying, Now, is that more rank and file? Is that more of the star player? Because the star player, yeah, they could say, I don't want to play that one game, where the backup center or the special teams player, they're going to want to maybe play that extra game because they're not making guaranteed money in upwards of $50, $60, $100 million. Those are the ones that are, I don't want to say they're scrapping by, but those are the ones that are going to want to get that extra paycheck. So to me, I think it's more overall based on just what he said and just getting a gut feeling. But we all know that if you're the quarterback or the wide receiver, the pass rusher, the left tackle, the middle linebacker, those guys are going to get paid, as we all know. The safety, yes, but it's the other positions, the backups, some of the players that I mentioned, those are the ones that I think are maybe even vociferous to say, no, we want to be a part of an 18-game season because that means more money in our pocket. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, it's down the road, but it's going to be interesting because if the line has already been drawn in the sand by the head of the union, the owners are going to have to pay attention. And I'm sure that the owners will say, all right, if that's going to be the case, you're going to have a lockout scenario or strike, more of a lockout situation. Again, that's for years down the road, but keep that in mind as we move it along here based on what had taken place earlier this week with the comments of the head of the players, that being Lloyd Howell Jr. Now, you have a couple of scenarios here with players looking for either a new address or forced to find a new address. One being Cooper Kupp of the Rams, saying that he does not want to leave LA, but of course with the scenario regarding money, and I don't know what the contract is, but they are certainly looking to see if they could trade their longtime wide receiver and Super Bowl MVP, I might add. And for him, he's now highly motivated to show that he still has a lot left, if you ask me. But for Kupp, who is a phenomenal receiver, we've seen what he's been able to do. Now, he has a tendency to not be healthy and miss a lot of games, but if you want to take a shot at a guy that certainly is very productive and has had a very good career, an excellent career, I might add, but he's a guy that is on the block. What is that going to take to not only get his contract, depending on how much he makes, how much guaranteed money he has left, but what are you willing to give up in the process? Obviously, that's something we'll have to wait and see. Probably more so toward the middle of March when the quote-unquote new season begins for the NFL, or maybe that happens days before the draft. So we'll have to keep in mind that as we get closer to that. So as much as he doesn't agree with the decision by the front office of the Rams, but he knows that wherever he's going to go, he's going to show and prove that he has a lot left in the tank, and we will obviously have to wait and see about that. And then you have Myles Garrett, the former Defensive Player of the Year. He's actually the current reigning Defensive Player of the Year. He wants out of Cleveland. He sees the direction of the franchise. They're going to have the second overall pick in this upcoming draft, which you think they may draft a quarterback, but with the Deshaun Watson and all the guaranteed money that he's left with 2 more years on his contract, who knows if they're going to cut bait there. And with the uncertainty of the direction of this franchise, he's requested a trade, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of teams lined up. The first one that comes to mind are the Commanders. They could certainly use him. They do have Deron Payne as well as Jonathan Allen in the middle of that line, but imagine now having a pass rushing extraordinaire like Myles Garrett there to complement that defensive line. He would be a game-wrecking force, and he already is as a member of the Browns, but it's time for him to part ways as he feels. And you know what? He's earned that. He's been in the league 8 years. He's had well over 100 sacks. He's a guy that is going to the Hall of Fame. And unlike Kevin Garnett of years past, where he wanted to stick it out in Minnesota, he wanted to, as much as he's been a part of the T-Wolves at that time, but when he traded into Boston and obviously won a title, now he's saying, And you know what? I give it up to him. He's been in the league long enough. And I know I talk about the whole player empowerment, and he does have 2 years left on his contract that is non-guaranteed, so he's got all his money. So I'm sure whatever can be maneuvered as far as a capologist for the team that's going to acquire him, I'm sure it would be a situation where they probably would give him a new contract and new guaranteed money, depending. But I think it's time, and you know what? Kudos. And I'm not saying that as a Steelers fan to get him out of the division. Who knows? Watch him go to Baltimore. Could you imagine that? And I don't think Cleveland will make a trade with Baltimore. If they do, they might as well close shop and do something else, because that would just be an atrocity if you ask me. And then one thing I didn't discuss, I'm only going to spend literally 60 seconds on this. Justin Tucker, the accusations going back to last week, and I didn't mention that on Monday's podcast, but do we have a Deshaun Watson 2.0, speaking of the former embattled quarterback? And although he's come out and vehemently denied that there was no wrongdoing on his part, this is an time area or time frame from 2012 to 2016 that a lot of these accusations came about with several therapists, and there have been more that come out from the initial report. So I would think when it's all said and done, who knows, you may have a scenario where you'll have civil suits. I don't know if you're going to have criminal suits, but here's the thing. He's probably going to miss the first 8 games next year based on how this is all going to play out here from the latter part of winter into spring, etc. So just something to keep in mind when it comes to the future Hall of Famer and the kicker there of the Ravens. So that's what you have with the NFL. Looking forward to, even though the game, like I said, I hate, but it's going to be compelling. And once we get to 6:30 kickoff, I'll be ready to go into the game, etc. And I'll talk more about this on the back end. Just keep in mind, people, that I'm going to have a live stream on YouTube on my channel at JAYREELZ after the game. So you're going to get instant reaction, analysis, breakdown of the game right after, just minutes after the confetti falls down in the Superdome, where I will break down the game there on my YouTube channel around 10 p.m. Eastern. So definitely stay tuned for that. And I'll talk more about that in the back end, because I have a huge announcement after I break down the game and recap it. So definitely want to stay tuned for that. Now, as I lace up the high tops to go to the NBA, and boy, what a week it's been for the association. And we talked about it Monday, the whole scenario regarding Luka Doncic, which I can't wrap my head around it, even, 5 days later. But he is now a Laker, as we all know, and Anthony Davis is a Dallas Maverick. And then you had a bunch of other trades that happened. De'Aaron Fox making his case there in San Antonio in his first game with a big-time performance there against the Hawks there yesterday and a win. And they like what they've seen so far out of their young guard that they got from Sacramento. But the story of the last month and change, but even more so the last couple of weeks, is that Jimmy Butler has found a home. It looked like it was going to be Phoenix, where Kevin Durant looked like he was going to be a part of that deal, where maybe Golden State was going to be involved, where he would go to Golden State, Durant, and then Jimmy Butler would go to Phoenix, and then whomever would go to Miami. I guess Andrew Wiggins would have been a part of that, which he ended up being. He, Kyle Anderson, and there was a bunch of players, moving parts, etc., with this deal of Butler going to the Bay Area. But for Durant, he even mentioned that he did not want to go back with a reunion with the Warriors, so that was out of the question. And who knows, with the deadline at 3 p.m., and by the time you listen to this, it will come and gone. But I don't know if Kevin Durant is going to be a part of any deals here over the course of the next few hours. But for Butler, he does go to Golden State to group with Steph Curry, Draymond Green, etc. Again, you had Andrew Wiggins go to Miami, Kyle Anderson as well. And you have picks and players going all over the place. Utah getting involved again. Utah's been involved in all these deals, whether it was the Luka and Anthony Davis deal, a ton of other deals that have transpired here throughout the course of these last few days leading up to the deadline. And then now they're going to have picks galore, and good for them, because I'm sure they're going to retool and revamp and do whatever it takes there in the Salt Lake City to have some sort of relevancy under their coach Will Hardy. But you had Dennis Schrader go to Utah. You had Josh Richardson go from Miami to Detroit. Yeah, I mean, it's just been a mess. And you know how these NBA trades work, because when you have multiple teams involved, it has your head spin. And when the draft comes, when they have 900 first-round picks, and you wonder, wait, how does this team have all these picks? Then you think, oh, by way of Sacramento to Miami to Detroit to Phoenix to Golden State. And you're like, oh, okay, that's how that trade consummated. So anyway, with all that being said, Butler, he'll end up signing a 2-year, $100 million deal, $111 million, I might add. So for the Warriors, the big question is, with Jimmy Butler in tow, they, being the Warriors, are they going to be a threat there in the West? Sad to say, in my eyes, no way. I don't think so. And Butler will be rejuvenated, and even though there is the expectation that he's going to sign an extension after this year, or who knows, maybe before the year is up, we'll have to wait and see on that. But to me, I don't think Butler, despite the fact that he's a gritty player, a very good player, very good, but he's not going to be the reason why the Warriors are going to have a long playoff run in front of them. I don't see it. I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe they'll have their moments. Maybe they do get into the playing scenario where they get into the top 10. And this is a team that started their year, 12-3? And since then, they've been a disaster. So now I'm expected to think that Jimmy Butler, a guy that does have pedigree, but also has pedigree in the other way where he's jumped from team to team and burned bridges along the way. Not that he's going to do so here because he's going to be the good soldier. But even though we can look at the back of his basketball card and he does have some memorable performances, whether it was in the bubble, that Game 4 against the Lakers, or the game against the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round where he willed his team to a victory there and had 56 points in the process. Yes, we have seen those flashes, but Jimmy Butler's not an automatic. Not in my eyes. So for that, I don't think the Warriors are going to be a team that the West is going to have to reckon with, whether you're OKC, whether you're Houston, whether you're the Lakers, whether you're Dallas, whether you're the Clippers, whether you're the Nuggets. Maybe if they get into the play-in and get to the tournament overall as an 8th seed, do I expect them to beat OKC? Maybe if this was a year ago, I would think that. But with the experience that they had from last year, losing in the second round, and with the way Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's playing, he is by far, I don't want to say by far because there's going to be people in Denver that think that Jokic, who's averaging a triple-double at center, could be in the running for another MVP, which would be 4 and 5 years. But I would think this is Shai or SGA's MVP to lose this year. He has just been by far a phenomenal player this year. And even last year, he was deserving to win it. So maybe this is the year, although Jokic is having a bigger year than the year prior, but they'll give it to SGA. But with all that being said, even though does it make the Warriors better? It does, but not to the point where, I'm going to have visions of a 2022 championship run dancing in my head if I'm a Warrior fan. So that's where I stand with that deal. Then you had another interesting deal that happened yesterday where the Raptors traded for Brandon Ingram from the Pelicans, who has not played because of an ankle sprain since 2 months now, since December. And when Ingram is healthy, he is a very good player. And you can even argue he's a top 25 player, which may not say a lot because if he's top 25, he's more on the bottom rung of that. He's not a top 5, top 10, top 15 player. But he does play a very big role as far as when he was with the Pelicans and being a guy that is a borderline All-NBA player. But if he's healthy, he can do some damage. And you're going to team him with Scotty Barnes. Great. They ship Kelly Olynyk and Bruce Brown, the former Nugget who won a title there a couple of years ago. Also a first and second round pick to the Raptors in the process. So if Ingram is healthy, not to say that the Raptors are going to do anything this year, but if they're building for the future, that's a good deal. Now, I don't know what Ingram's contract is, if he's in the final year of a deal where they're going to have to extend him. So that's something that they're going to have to certainly factor in on all this. But for Ingram, I thought if he's healthy, that's a better trade for Toronto than it would be. Because Bruce Brown, role player, a glue player, but not a big-time player. And Olynyk has bounced around, as you know, Boston, Miami, and now here with Toronto. So if Ingram is going to be healthy, he'll pay dividends for a Raptor team that's trying to find an identity here in the NBA. And then a couple of other deals where you had Chris Middleton traded for Kyle Kuzma. I thought that was very shrewd by the Bucks, although Kuzma, his shooting numbers have gone down this year, but he is athletic, provides a little defense, maybe not expected to do much, so he's not going to be on the radar considering it's all Giannis and Damian Lillard. And now we want to see a little bit more from Lillard. because he's a guy, as we all know, with Portland being the man, and now that he's not really the man, but you would think he'd be a great compliment to Giannis, but he hasn't had the same impact. Granted that he's not Batman on that team than you thought he would when he was traded to Milwaukee in the first place. So who knows? Maybe this is his time where he's going to point to the wristwatch and say Dame time. That will have to remain and find out in the weeks and months to come. But Middleton, who's had all these injuries with his knees and was in and out of the lineup, goes to Washington. Who knows? I'm sure maybe a buyout will be forced at some point to where he could go to a contender. But again, he has to remain healthy, and as we've seen, that hasn't been the case with him. But Kuzma, I thought that was a very shrewd deal there. And then the Lakers bringing a big man, knowing that they traded Davis to Dallas, so they go shopping in Charlotte, of all places, for Mark Williams, who's averaging 16 points, 9 rebounds a game, 7-footer, gives them size, even maybe a rim protector on top of that. Now, listen, I'm not watching Charlotte Hornets games to find out how Mark Williams is an NBA player, but if he's 16-9 and is 7 foot, maybe he's a guy that in this system, knowing with LeBron and obviously with Luka when he's back in the lineup and healthy, to go along with their role players, Austin Reeves. He's not a role player, he's a starter, but Rui Hachimura. Now, they lose some shooting here in the process because even though they have Luka, I get it, etc., but they were trading Dalton Connect, a young player who maybe they thought was going to be a part of their future. Well, he's gone. They also traded their 2031 first-round pick, as well as Cam Reddish, who has not really panned out, although had a lot of pub when he was part of that threesome in Duke with Zion Williamson, as well as R.J. Barrett. So Reddish now goes back into Charlotte. So let's see if Williams is going to pay dividends in a Laker uniform to see if he can elevate his game, and not only that, but also be a fixture there for a guy that, let's face it, if you're not in the Charlotte area, you wouldn't know who Mark Williams is if they fell on you. So let's see how he does there in La La Land. But that is pretty much your NBA with all of those deals that were made. And I don't expect many big deals to happen here over the course of the next few hours. So that means Kevin Durant, maybe Mitchell Robinson in a small deal because his name's been floated out there and he's another guy that can't stay healthy. So I don't know if you're going to get, I'm not going to say a blockbuster, but even a guy of significance and say, oh, wow, that guy got traded. I don't think you're going to see that here over the course of the next few hours. I can see some minor trades, some fringe trades, maybe certain teams, if the Cavaliers, maybe they want to get another guy that can come off the bench and score some points, and they're having pretty good bench as it is. Or maybe even the Celtics, if they want to add another big just for insurance for a one Kristaps Porzingis. I understand they had that with Neemias Queta, but still, maybe they want someone that's more seasoned, another veteran. Who knows what Brad Stevens may do there, or the Heat, maybe even with all these trades. And they also got PJ Tucker back. Remember, he had that issue there where he got traded from the Clippers to Utah, and then we felt that he was going to be on ice. We thought he would probably be cut and bought out there and then go elsewhere, but he gets traded back to Miami, so he's familiar with the Heat, as we know, being a part of that team a few years back. So the NBA, I don't think it's going to be anything that's noteworthy here. And let me see if anything has happened here over the last, whatever it is, 40 minutes that I've been recording. Yeah, Butler, we know. Chet Holmgren is set to return to the Raptors. I believe that's going to be this weekend. Yeah, we know about Ingram. So yeah, right now, nothing has really come down the pike as far as any deals here over the course of the last hour or so. So you know I have my fingers on the pulse on that. And if anything does, check my YouTube channel at JAYREELZ, as I'll throw my usual shorts to detail what is going on in sports and any big trades or anything that happens in that regard. And as far as the schedule here in this forthcoming week, because yes, when you talk about the standings, everything's the same. I know the Celtics with a big win there in Cleveland the other night, and it was big in this regard. They are 2-1 against the Cavs. Remember, they lost in Cleveland earlier this year, and also on top of that, beat them in the game where they snapped that 15-game winning streak to start the season. But the Celtics were very good in that game. They had more of a team focus. They had not have the one guy go off. It didn't have like Tatum have 35 points or Jaylen Brown had 28. Tatum had 22 points on 23 shots, but they had many contributions from Kristaps, from Jaylen Brown as well. Derek White added 6 threes, and they played very good defense. And even though there was a point of the game where it looked like the Cavaliers were going to come back, but they got a bucket and then 2 threes, layup by Derek White, and then back-to-back threes to extend the lead from, I believe at the time it was 2 to 10, and they went away winning that game. So I thought that was big because I don't think that the Celtics are going to capture the East, despite the fact that they're 5 games back and still with do the math here, 31 games to play. Not to say it's insurmountable, and we would think that the Cavs are going to play with this consistency. I don't see the bottom falling out unless they get some key injuries. But I think that game was more on the Celtics because they did lose that one game in Cleveland earlier this year. And that's not to say if they would have lost this game, it would have been curtains for them if they do see Cleveland in a conference final. But they're still the Celtics. They're still the defending champs, and they showed you why there in that game the other night with the NBA's best road record at 20-6. So for what that's worth. So that was a big game, and the Lakers have played well here. We talked about the game there on Monday when they beat the Knicks on Saturday, and then they disposed and dismantled the Clippers there on Tuesday night. So you wonder if the Lakers now are going to get some big-time traction, not only with this trade, but maybe moving up in the standings. Now, granted, they're only 5th in the West, but they are 10 games over. When was the last time the Lakers were 10 games over 500? It's been quite some time, and even though the West is stacked, with those middling group teams, when I say middling, I'm talking about Memphis and Houston. Are those two teams going to be threats in the West when it's all said and done? Now we'll have to wait and see. And now the Rockets have hit the skids here. They've lost 4 in a row, including back-to-back games at the Garden on Monday against the Knicks. And then just a crazy game on Tuesday where they had a 3-point lead late and they gave up a 3. And then on top of that, in the inbounds pass, they gave it away, and then the Nets had another 3. Just a terrible loss there by the Rockets. So they have lost 4 in a row, but it's going to be interesting to see those young upstart teams, how they're going to blend in. I'll put Oklahoma City aside because they are a young team. But for Memphis, Houston, how they're going to stack up at the end of the year with the Denvers, the Lakers, even the Clippers for that matter, because the Clippers are 3 in a loss, 2 behind the Lakers there. But NBA, that's what you have. And, of course, on Monday, and obviously once the Super Bowl's come and gone, I'll get into a lot more NBA as we get deeper into the fall and winter sports. And as far as the schedule, you have an NBA Finals rematch tonight, Dallas in Boston tonight. And I don't think Anthony Davis is going to suit up. I think they're going to wait till his homecoming there on Saturday because I believe Dallas will then, after their game tonight, will return back home and they will host the Rockets there in an afternoon tilt there in Dallas on Saturday. So the Mav fan, I know they can't put it all on Anthony Davis here, and we know that they are outraged by the trade, and Davis is going to have to remain healthy because if he's healthy and he contributes, hopefully they can forget, at least for this year, Luka Doncic. But if he's not going to be in the lineup, or if he gets in the lineup and gets hurt, and it's going to be on the shelf for a considerable amount of time, the front office of Nico Harrison and even the ownership group, that's not Mark Cuban. Remember, he's a minority shareholder now, but they will never hear the end of it, as we talked about a little bit there on Monday, where they didn't want to pay him the $345 million Supermax based on the recent behavior there of Luka. But you have Dallas at Boston tonight, Orlando at Denver's a good game, Golden State at LA. Then you have the Pacers playing the Clippers there as well. Tomorrow, Milwaukee at Atlanta. Yeah, you don't really have any good games there tomorrow on the schedule. Saturday, Houston and Dallas, like I mentioned. Indiana playing the Lakers. You have Oklahoma City, Memphis. There's a good game there. Although Memphis, what are they? They have a 5-game lead in the conference over Memphis. But an interesting test there for the Grizz. Boston at New York. That is your ABC Saturday showcase. They haven't played since the opening game this year, if you recall. So that's going to be an interesting game to watch, and I'll be all over that. Denver at Phoenix. That is on Saturday. And then Sunday you have a very light slate with the big one being Philadelphia at Milwaukee. That is your ABC 2 o'clock game leading into the Super Bowl. Now let me turn my attention as I lace up the skates and take a trip around the ice real quick. Well, as far as real quick, college basketball, nothing really to unpack other than what we talked about there on Monday. I know St. John's had a big win there against Marquette a couple of nights ago, and they're going to be a threat. I'll talk more about St. John's once we get past everything, because to me, from what I gather, they haven't really taken over the city just yet. And I think a lot of it is because St. John's is well removed from the days of Lou Carnesecca, rest in peace, or even the Eric Barkley, Ron Artest, the Omar Cook days later on. Yeah, those teams, obviously are a thing of the past, where this team, there hasn't been the one guy that they've gravitated to. Yes, you do have Rick Pitino there, but I'll talk more about that on Monday as I turn my attention to the NHL. Now, really the only thing to discuss is grade 8, Alexander Ovechkin, who got another goal there in a win against the Panthers the other night. Showdown of the top 2 teams there in the East, where now he's 17 goals away from breaking the all-time goal-scoring record. I know I've talked about this pretty much every podcast, or at least whenever he scores. But now, in thinking about it, the Capitals have 29 games left, 17 goals. It's certainly doable, and I think at the pace he's going at, he's going to break it. But as the season wears on and he's recovered from this leg injury, of course, I want to see it, and I'm sure all fans want to see it. But my thing is, and it's twofold. One, how will the attention get when he gets to single digits? Because this is a record, unlike the home run record in baseball or some of the big historic records that we've seen in baseball, whether it was Cal Ripken or the regular season home run record or the all-time home run record as we saw there in 98 with McGuire and Maris, and obviously with Bonds in 07, and he breaking McGuire's record in 2001, where McGuire did it in 98. So it's not on that level, because hockey is technically, in the grand scheme of things, is 4th on the pecking order: NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and then you have hockey of the pro sports. I'm not including college football, because you would think that that's 1A to the NFL, or MMA, because I know it's very popular in this day and age. So out of the 4 major pro sports, obviously the NHL is last. But A, is it going to garner any attention as he gets closer to breaking this record? And not only that, will we see it? Will ESPN, TNT, not have a cutaway, not have a moment? I believe that as you get closer, especially when he's 3 goals away, because who knows, he can get a hat trick in a game. But will it garner any attention, number one? And number 2, will they show it? Because I've had a problem with the NHL here just this year when Florida was in Edmonton in a Stanley Cup Finals rematch and you couldn't find it anywhere. It was on the NHL Network. Okay, fine. But that game should be on a network. It should be on ESPN or TNT. Shouldn't be on the NHL Network. And I get it. It doesn't have the panache. It doesn't have the flair of the NFL or even the NBA. And the NBA regular season games are snores. That if you knew tonight was Dallas at Boston, would you even think to turn it on or even watch? No, because the NBA doesn't even highlight those games the way they should. So, do I expect the NHL to do that? No, but you would think that the NHL would do whatever it takes to try to get its sport at least on the radar of a sports fan to say, oh, wow, there's a Stanley Cup rematch tonight, Florida-Edmonton, I'm going to watch. And nobody even knows when Edmonton's going back to Florida, which I think is in the coming weeks, but still. So for Ovechkin, who has a phenomenal career, and you can even argue should he be a part of Mount Rushmore, which is another question for another day. But to me, as long as I'm doing this podcast, I'm going to talk about it. I don't know about anybody else, and I know that unless it's a hockey podcast, no one's talking about it. That's why I talk about all sports, people, and this is why more people need to be aware of what's going on in the sports landscape, because this is a record that when Wayne Gretzky retired back in 1999, it was unthinkable. It was untouchable. It was really one of those that there's no one on God's green earth that's going to come close to sniffing it. And you had this one player. I get it. He's not an American-born player. He's not a Canadian-born player. He's a Russian-born player. But you know what? He is still, he's an immortal as it is. But to attain that achievement and to get that record and to surpass Wayne Gretzky, who, as I said weeks ago, is arguably the 3rd greatest athlete that has ever graced this planet when it comes to the major sports, because I'm not talking about, let's say, Jesse Owens or even Michael Phelps. But you know what? Wayne Gretzky is up there. You could argue Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, Babe Ruth. Those are the 3. Yes, I'm not including Muhammad Ali because, again, I'm talking about the 4 major sports. Because Muhammad Ali, obviously, he is, we all know, he's an immortal figure in the sports landscape. But Jordan, Gretzky, Ruth, he belongs there. I don't care what you tell me. I don't care, JAYREELZ, you're off your rocker. You don't know your ass from your elbow. No, you guys don't know your ass from your elbow. Do some homework. Do some research. How many records does Wayne Gretzky hold all time? Think about it. He's got more assists in his career than players have points. And I'm talking about all-timers. So keep that in mind, people. I'll be on top of it. You know I've been on top of it. But you know I'm going to pay attention to whether or not ESPN, TNT, if they're going to show these games as it gets closer to him breaking that record, because that is going to be a big moment in the world of sports. Maybe not to a lot of people. Maybe not to everyone. But to some, and not just the hockey fan, but the one who cares about sports like I do. I want to see that moment. And as far as the sport overall, I know the Penguins traded Marcus Pettersson to Vancouver, and then he signed a 6-year, $33 million deal, defenseman. So that's a big move there for Vancouver as they try to see what they could do, making some waves there in the Western Conference. But real quick before I get to the schedule, again, you have teams that have been playing well here. I know Ottawa, I talked about a couple weeks ago, really last week sometime, but now the Red Wings have won 7 in a row. And it's interesting, they won 7 in a row and they haven't made up a ton of ground because they are still 5 points behind the Maple Leafs, 6 points behind the front-running Florida Panthers there in the Atlantic Division. So you wonder whether or not they're going to run out of gas here a little bit, but they are part of this playoff mix. And once we get past the Super Bowl, we'll start talking wild cards and get into the whole playoff picture standings, not only just with the NHL, but also with the NBA. And then you have the Islanders who bounced back with a win there against the Vegas Golden Knights after losing there on Sunday to the to the Panthers there. And they're a point ahead of the Rangers. As we know, they're trying to jockey for position to see if they can get into the wild card mix. Now the Winnipeg Jets are back to their winning ways. They've won 7 in a row. Now put some distance between them and the Stars. Most points in the sport, with 2 points ahead of the Capitals. But again, as I've said a million times over, that's a mountain that you don't want to get to the top of the best record or most points in the regular season, because that does not automatically translate to getting to and winning a Stanley Cup final. But for them, they put themselves with a sizable lead, although the Stars have 2 games in hand. And then you have Edmonton, who now a little bit of distance because the Vegas Golden Knights have lost 4 in a row, including 2 games in a row where they lost to the Rangers and Islanders on this trip where they'll play the Devils tonight. And Edmonton now, who have 72 points, 4 ahead of the Vegas Golden Knights, who have a 6-point lead ahead of the LA Kings. So that is pretty much an NHL. When we look at the standings overall, everything is pretty much the same. I know the Red Wings have played well. Yes, Winnipeg, etc. And then as far as your schedule goes over the next few days, you have, like I mentioned, Vegas and Jersey. Washington is in Philadelphia tonight. And then Washington will host Colorado. No, excuse me, that's Edmonton. My apologies. Washington, they won't play till Sunday, huh? Yeah, they'll play Utah at home. So those are the 2 games to see what's going to happen there on the Ovechkin watch. But besides that, Carolina at Minnesota, Colorado at Calgary. Tomorrow, Penguins at New York. And the Penguins obviously not doing good. Sidney Crosby was out with an upper body injury. Who knows the extent of that? So I'll have to keep that in mind or take a look at that to see. Not that the Penguins are any threat, but we know about Crosby, how he is all time. Colorado at Edmonton, Dallas at LA. Saturday, your ABC doubleheader is Tampa at Detroit, Vegas at Boston, Pittsburgh at Philly, Rangers in Columbus. Yeah, you don't really have much here. Toronto, Vancouver, Islanders in Minnesota. And then Sunday, you have the 2 games, Tampa at Montreal, Utah at Washington, obviously in the afternoon before the Super Bowl. And then lastly, let's wrap it up here, people, as I dig into the batter's box and go through what's happening in baseball. And now that the Met fan, like yours truly, we can exhale. Pete Alonso has signed 2 years, $54 million, $30 million this upcoming year with an opt-out. What does this mean for him? Well, it only means that he'll bat behind Juan Soto and in hopes of having a monster year and maybe get the big payday next year. There are what ifs, but if you're going to bat behind Soto, I'm sure he's going to get a steady diet of good pitches to hit and may put up 40 to 50 home runs, 110 to 120, and fingers crossed, can we bat 260 instead of being 220, 210? But what it means for him is that, all right, he didn't get his long-term deal, which he painted himself into a corner. How this deal was brokered, did Scott Boras stay out of the way? Maybe there was some private conversations between he and his agent, and then he went to the front office to say, hey, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll sign that 2-year deal as long as you're throwing an opt-out. That was the case, fine. So for Alonso in the short term, not so good, but if he has a big-time year, that could pay dividends long-term. But as far as the team, this was enormous. And I'm not trying to make Pete Alonso out to be Albert Pujols, but knowing that they have Soto, knowing that they have their top of the lineup set with Lindor, Vientos, Soto, then Alonso, follow that by Nimmo. Who knows with Marte, because your outfield at this very moment is crowded. I don't think you're going to put Nimmo to center. I know they brought in Jose Siri. I don't know if he's going to be more of a platoon there with Nimmo because he is a right-handed stick, but you're paying Nimmo $20 million a year, so you're not going to platoon him. So unless they're going to unload Marte here in the days leading up to spring training and beyond, who knows? But for that lineup with Alvarez a year wiser, let's see what he could do. This is a team that is a very good top lineup, top heavy. I get it, 1 through 5, maybe 6. But with Alonso in tow, they could have a big-time year. And they needed him, so did Alonso for that matter, but I think the Mets needed him just as much, only because the lineup is lengthened, that bona fide bopper, as you know, and for a Met team that has big-time aspirations, as we know, I think that was enormous. Not huge. It was enormous for them to bring back Alonso into the mix. So that was kudos to management and even Alonso to come back. And if he does have a bad year or a subpar year for him, similar to last year, 34-88, what are you about, 230? Then he'll have to eat it and come back and hope to have a big year in 2026. But that is for well down the road. It's about now where pitchers and catchers will start reporting here in the next week or so, where the position players will follow suit. So I'm sure that drive down to Port St. Lucie is going to be, all right, maybe not what he had wanted prior to the start of spring training, but knowing that he's going to be a part of this team and he wants to be in New York, I'm sure at least he can roll down the windows and exhale to say, all right, I'm part of the big group here that is expected to do enormous things here in 2025. And then the Cubs traded for Ryan Brazier. Brazier, who is the Dodger, part of that World Series bullpen, and because of the reinforcements that they have gotten this offseason with the Tanner Scotts of the world, the Kirby Yates, was made Brazier expendable. Now he goes to the Cubs, where they have what seems to be a pretty decent bullpen. If you recall, not only bringing in Brazier, but they also traded for Ryan Presley, the former Astro closer. So now you got a bit of a back end that looks pretty good for a Cub team that's trying to get some relevance and trying to have a big year on the south side of Chicago. On the north side. South side, of course, are the White Sox. But on the north side there in Wrigleyville, we'll see. You know, Brazier is not going to be confused with Jeff Nelson or anybody like that from Yankee yesteryear. Certainly not John Wetland or even Mariano. But he is a capable reliever, good reliever. So Cubs brought in some reinforcements, so good for them as they try to see if they could do anything there in an NL Central that maybe is not as wide open. But hey, you never know there with a division that still could be up for grabs, even with the Brewers winning a division last year. And one last note before I bid adieu, which is it important? No, but I gotta give her just due. Simona Halep, two-time Grand Slam champ, beat Serena in Wimbledon back in 2019 and also won a French in 2018. Calls it a career at the age of 33, retires. Now, I understand a few years back had that doping scandal where she took a illegal drug which happened to be contaminated, and therefore they appealed. She did serve 9 months. That's why you saw her there perform. And she was in Romania for a tournament here early in the week where she lost. And at that point was the platform and the stage for her to exit stage right, for her to retire, and was a former number 1 women's player overall. Now, I get it that doping scandal a little bit tarnishes it, despite the fact that she already won the 2 tournaments and it was long before the doping scandal, but we don't know if that contaminant, if that was something that she was able to get away with prior to. But again, she did serve her time, and although she did appeal it, 9 months, they figured out, they scrapped it, the investigation showed that, yes, maybe it was something that she was unaware of taking, and because it was contaminated, she did serve her time. But be that as it may, she was a two-time winner, and congratulations to her on her retirement. Moving on to the next phase of her life and career. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books, as always. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the toy department of life called sports. If you haven't done so, people, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars on Apple, Spotify, of course, the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. And programming note, live stream Sunday night, right after the Super Bowl, figuring that 10 o'clock hour Eastern time. Whenever the confetti starts to fall down, I'll have everything set up, ready to go. Maybe not the very second, but there'll be a lead-in, etc. So you'll get instant reaction to my thoughts on Super Bowl 59 down in New Orleans, as well as a big announcement that's going to be made, which I talked about on the podcast Monday. But if you don't want to go back and listen to it, which I hope you do, but if you don't, wait till Monday, because I have a huge announcement regarding an upcoming event early next month. So if you listen to the podcast, you already know. But if you haven't, stay tuned, because it's going to be huge, and it'll be brought to the forefront at the end of the live stream come Sunday night. So definitely increase the visibility with the Apple, Spotify, JAYREELZ on YouTube. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so with the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number. And the email, if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA, talking sports since birth, not going anywhere. And just like I mentioned earlier, where else are you going to get all these sports? NFL, NBA, hockey, tennis, baseball. Didn't really talk college basketball, but I'll talk that all in one podcast, a little bit over an hour. I'm waiting, still waiting. This is why I am your source for all the sauce in the world of sports. Keep coming back, people. As long as I'm alive and breathing, pumping out 2 podcasts a week, the YouTube channel, lifestyle content, etc. This is my full-time job, independent content creator, podcaster, trying to blaze a path and trail in this business as someone who sticks to his craft, who's always looking to explore, get better, so on and so forth. So please, hop on board, people, on this journey, because it's going to be a long one, as long as the graces of the good Lord has me here on this planet Earth. Because you know that as long as I'm sitting in front of this microphone and camera, I will continue to deliver nothing but passion, fire, fury, energy with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South End to the South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.